Okay, let us look at the first circular. Okay, so we have already discussed what is the difference between circular and notification. I hope you guys are aware of it. Circulars are just the department views on a particular provision. Okay, what is that department thinks out of that particular entire set of provision? Because as and when a provision comes in, there could be a lot of confusion that could be around. Okay, there could be a lot of confusion that could be around. And it is very important that the department comes up and then clarifies it. So that's why every circular we just use the term clarificatory circular. So circulars are clarificatory in nature. Again, circular cannot amend the provisions. You will have to be very careful about it. Circular cannot go ahead and then amend the provisions. We said notifications can do it because notification actually gets the power. The government gets the power from the parliament to notify something. Based on that only notifications would come. Okay, so let's look at the circular. We will first read the circular. Together with me, you read the circular. When we will take an example, then you will have full clarity on what is that the intention is. And you can see the date, and it makes a lot of relevance to our discussion. When did they come up with the circular? This is circular number 1. Okay, so this is the circular 1/2017 that came up. And it came on 7th of July, which means that within a week of introduction of GST, this particular circular came in. So government was immediately clarifying, see, I did not mean to interpret the provision like that. So I would like to clarify what's my interpretation is. On what area they're putting this particular circular? They're saying that this circular is relevant in case of para 1, schedule 1 cases. Okay. So they're saying that, para 2 schedule 1 cases, which says that whenever you're taking supply between distinct person, I would like to clarify few things. You have to look at this circular and then get an understanding on how that particular transaction would be like. Let's read the circular, then we will have more clarity. Okay. So interstate movement of conveyance between distinct person. Okay, so here they are trying to give you an understanding on what do you mean by conveyance. Okay, so conveyance can be trains, truck, vessel, containers, etc. Okay, so they say interstate movement of conveyance between whom? Distinct person. That is why I am saying that this particular circular intends to clarify something that is given in para 2 schedule 1. Why are you making this movement of conveyance? You're moving the conveyance from one place to another place. One place to another place in the sense you're moving from one of your entity to another branch of your entity. That's why we're calling it as distinct person. How can it be two types? It can either be within the state separately registered, or it can be in 2 different states. The circular is issued under which law? It is issued under IGST, but the understanding is equally applicable to CGST. So interstate movement of conveyance between distinct person, for what purpose? For carrying goods or passengers or both. So either it is for carrying goods or passengers or both, or for providing repair and maintenance. It could be for either reasons. But except for further supply of such goods, such conveyances, except for further supply of such conveyances. Again, I'll repeat. Interstate movement of conveyance between distinct person for carrying goods or passengers or both, or for repair and maintenance, except for further supply of such conveyance. It has been clarified as it is not a supply. Very, very important on our understanding of the provision. This clarification gives you an idea what is that the government is trying to tax here and what is that they're not trying to tax here. Then there is one more circular that came in, which is circular 21/2017, or it's a GST circular, which gave similar clarification from the above circular. They said same clarification is applicable to interstate movement of rigs, tools and spares and all goods on wheel like a crane between distinct person, which means that is also clarified as not a supply. So here the circular wording says that they're trying to clarify something. What is that they're trying to clarify? They're saying that even though certain transaction happens between distinct person, They would like to clarify these are not supply, or these are not the activities which they would like to call as supply. Now let's look at the notes. I have given you 3 notes for your understanding. First one, supply of goods other than whatever is mentioned above becomes a supply. So they're saying that I would like to exclude only those things which I have mentioned above. So anything other than that will become a supply even without consideration if it happens between distinct person. Then second one, they are trying to give you little more understanding on documentation. So as and when there is no supply, when there is transfer of goods for reasons other than supply, instead of tax invoice, a document called as delivery challan will be issued under Rule 55 of CGST Rules 2017. They also clarify the same clarification is applicable for CGST and SGST also. I want you to quickly go through this particular circular once at your end. Please read it at your end once. Then I'll explain you with an example. You will easily understand. There is one question that came in it came in May 2018 RTP. There is one question which we will discuss after we have full understanding. There are a few more additional areas that is being tested there. So once this chapter is over, there is one question that we will be able to solve. But it's all common sense understanding based question. Can I go ahead? Can I have few yes either on the chat box or on the WhatsApp group? Can I, guys? Wonderful. Okay, let us go ahead and then explain the same thing with an example. I'll tell you a story, a case study. So our example guy is Mr. Ajmal. So Mr. Ajmal is running a repair shop. He's running a repair shop. His company name is Repair India Private Limited. He has 2 branches. One branch is in Kochi, another branch is in Coimbatore. What is that he is into? He is into repairing very heavy machines in various industries. So he has a lot of technicians who can actually repair a lot of machines. So he has a repair truck. So how many branches? He has 2 branches. One is in Kochi, another in Coimbatore. So with this particular understanding itself, we can say that okay, these are actually in 2 different states. Of course, Kochi would have had a different registration compared to Coimbatore. So these are having 2 separate registrations. Now he has a repair truck. He has a repair truck. So what are the things that he has inside the repair truck? He has a lot of tools inside it. He has crane inside it, and he has certain goods also inside it. So what is the mode of operation that Ajmal works as? So whenever, say for example, there's a factory in Kochi which is having a one machine under overall. Okay, one machine requires a repair. So you contact Ajmal. What Ajmal immediately does is that he sends his repair truck. Like we already know, say for example our car gets some breakdown or our bike gets some breakdown and we want some repair to be done. So what we ideally do is that, say for example it's not in a towable distance. So we will call the repair guy. He comes up in his Jeep or whatever vehicle he has. That vehicle will be equipped with all the required equipments for repairing. So he will have everything. He will be ready. He will send that particular repair vehicle. They come and then do it. Say it gets breakdown at some national highway. You know that the service guy sends a vehicle. It has everything to fix it. Are you guys understanding? So similar to that, Ajmal is also having a repair truck, wherein whenever any particular company has a repair thing to be done, Ajmal will send this particular truck, and the truck will go with a technician. Truck also has a lot of items like the tools that is required, the crane that is required to repair it, and whenever that goods are required, that is also the spares and goods are also carried with it. Now here, what is the transaction that I am discussing about? Now we already know that Ajmal is having two branches. One is in Kochi, Coimbatore. Both are separately registered. For easy understanding, we'll assume it is 001 and 002. Next question would be, are they distinct person? The answer is yes, they are distinct person. Why they are considered to be distinct person? Because both of them are in two separate states and both are registered. Thereby, it will be considered to be distinct person. Now, as the moment I call a transaction to be transaction between distinct person, what is not required? Whenever you move any, you make any supply between them. Not necessarily goods or services, any supply. You will have to be very careful about the words. They said supply between distinct persons. So if any supply happens between Kochi branch and Coimbatore branch, that will come inside the ambit of taxability without consideration. That's the whole point. Now what happens is, right now this particular repair truck is sitting in the location of my Kochi branch. Ajmal's Kochi branch has this truck. From Coimbatore branch got a call from a factory which is there in Tirupur. So Tirupur factory requires a repair. Now who will get the order? The Coimbatore one, which is the nearby repair shop. So the nearby repair office got the offer, and they said that we would like to avail your services. Now Coimbatore requires this repair truck to be there. But where right now the repair truck is in? It is in Kochi. So from Kochi, to do the repair work in a factory in Tirupur near Coimbatore, the Kochi manager is sending the vehicle to Coimbatore. So the vehicle is going from Kochi to Coimbatore. Now my question to you is that, what are the goods that are supplied from Kochi to Coimbatore? What are the type of goods that are being supplied? So there is transfer of goods that is happening. How many goods have reached from Kochi to Coimbatore? So whatever truck that was there in the books of accounts of Kochi has now reached Coimbatore. Now whatever tools that was there in the books of accounts of Kochi has now reached Coimbatore. And whatever whatever goods that was there in the books of accounts of Kochi has also reached Coimbatore. So what do you mean by goods? Goods are any kind of movable property. Okay, so every kind of movable property becomes a goods. Thereby truck is also goods. Whatever spare goods are there, that is also goods. Tools are goods. Crane is goods. Everything is goods. Are you guys understanding? Okay, now you have the bigger question. Since these two are distinct person, whether it becomes a supply. Now both of these are owned by whom? Both of these entities are owned by Ajmal. Since both of these are owned by Ajmal, you will have to understand that as far as Ajmal is concerned, are they doing any transaction here? No, Ajmal is just sending goods from his Kochi branch, or sending the truck from Kochi branch to his own Coimbatore branch. So as far as Ajmal is concerned, it's just a transfer of vehicle from one branch to another branch. He does not call it as a billable supply. But as per GST law, whatever I have taught you in the previous class says that whenever there is transactions such is happening between distinct persons, what is not required? What is not required, consideration is not required. So even if Coimbatore branch is not paying any money to Kochi branch, it still becomes a supply. So effectively, what is the problem that happens when it becomes a supply? What is the problem that happens when it becomes a supply? When it becomes a supply, GST is payable. So for example, this becomes a supply. Who has to pay GST here? Which branch is making the supply? So as per this example, Kochi branch is making the supply. So Kochi branch pays the GST, and who takes the credit of that particular GST? Coimbatore branch takes the credit of that particular GST. Are you guys understanding this logic? But even though Coimbatore can take the credit, do you think that amount is going to be very small? No, right? Say the truck value is 50 lakhs. Now Kochi has to bill 50 lakhs to Coimbatore, and Kochi will pay GST on 50 lakhs. Coimbatore takes the credit. After the usage, what happens to this truck? Coimbatore will send back the truck to Kochi. Now Coimbatore is making supply to Kochi. Are you guys understanding? So government came up, okay, there is a problem because anything can be goods. Even one conveyance that is going from Kochi to Coimbatore can be considered to be supply of goods. Say for example, this is not a repair truck. This is just a bus that Kochi branch owns, which is transporting their employees from Kochi to Coimbatore. So ideal scenario, it means that once goods are reaching, the possession of the bus is changed from Kochi to Coimbatore, and in GST these two are distinct persons, then it becomes a supply, even though there is no consideration on the bus, even though there is no consideration on the truck in our case. Are you understanding? So to give you clarity whether that is what they try to make it taxable, it will create so much of trouble for everybody who's transporting goods, right? Are you guys understanding? So they said, no, that is not what I meant. If at all you transport, if at all you use conveyance, there is movement of conveyance from one of your distinct branches to another distinct person, then it is not regarded as a supply. So in this particular case, they said not only trucks, even tools and cranes, they are also not regarded as supply. This is the clarification that is given by the circular. This was not the intention. What is that they are trying to track here and then make it taxable? They said it is the goods that will become taxable. So which means that Kochi to Coimbatore, if I am transporting both truck, goods, tools and cranes, what alone will be called as a supply? It will be only goods that will be called as supply. Both tools and truck will not be regarded as supply because of circular 1. It is giving you clarification. So truck is a conveyance, thereby it will not become a supply. Tools is not a supply as per the clarification, but goods becomes a supply. Now next question, the moment the moment goods becomes a supply, what document should be issued? What is the document which gives you an understanding that it is a supply? So each of the transactions will be associated with a document. So the moment a transaction becomes a supply, the moment transaction becomes a supply, what document will be issued? Tax invoice will be issued. So the moment it becomes a supply, tax invoice will be issued, probably only when tax is payable. They are a registered person, they are making a supply which is taxable, tax invoice will be issued. Say they are a registered person. See, all documentation comes only when they are registered. Okay, I cannot ask a small tea vendor to issue tax invoice under GST. I cannot put any other document to him because he is not even registered. So first it has to be that the law is applicable to him. So the moment GST is applicable, you will have to comply with all the documents that is mentioned by the law. So the moment it becomes supply and GST is collected on that supply, the document that is issued is tax invoice. The moment there is movement of goods, I am taking goods from one branch to another branch, but I do not call it as supply. When will I not call it as supply? Case number 1. I have two branches, one is in Kochi, another one is in Calicut. Both are in Kerala. I am not separately registered, which means that am I distinct person? I am not distinct person. So when I have two branches which are not distinct person, I make a movement. There is movement of goods, but it's not a supply. If it is movement of goods and it's a supply, then tax invoice should be issued. Now the moment it's not, it is having movement of goods and it is not a supply, then instead of tax invoice, there is another document that will be issued called as delivery challan. We call it as DZ, delivery challan. Are you guys with me on this? Okay, so In case of tools, I will issue a delivery challan because I do not call it as a supply. Are you guys clear on this particular concept now? Let us go ahead and then read the circular once again. Now it will make more sense to you. Can I read the circular once again? Circular 1 says that interstate movement of conveyance between distinct person. What do you mean by conveyance? It can be train, it can be truck, it can be vessel, it can be container, anything. For what purpose I am moving this conveyance from one place to another? It could be either for carrying goods or passengers or both, or for repair and maintenance. Except for further supply of such conveyances, not for further supply. In such cases, this movement of conveyance will be clarified. It is not a supply. That is not what the government is trying to charge to GST. What else it says? The same clarification is applicable to interstate movement of rigs, tools and spares and all goods on wheel, like crane between distinct person, clarified as not a supply. So the same clarification is even applicable to interstate movement of rigs, tools, spares and all goods on the wheel. Like I have given you the example wherein I told you that even if you are transporting tools, spares, etc. between distinct person, that is also clarified. It is not a supply. But other than that, which means that any goods other than conveyance, tools, rigs, spares and then crane, if you transport between distinct person, that will be coming under the schedule 1 para 2 and it becomes a supply. Second, the moment it is not a supply, you still moving the goods, what document will be issued? Delivery challan will be issued. Now the same clarification is applicable for CGST, SGST also, which means that now I have given you example, one branch is there in Kochi, another one is there in Coimbatore. Say for example, one branch is there in Calicut, another one is there in Kochi. Both are within the state and both are separately registered. Then also it becomes a distinct person. Then also this particular circular clarification can be applied. Are you guys clear on this? Two additional points to be clarified. Point number 1. What do you mean by this? Except for further supply of such conveyance. What do you mean by this wordings? They are saying that conveyance can also be... somebody has asked me the same question. I was otherwise also going to clarify. So, they are saying that in one cases, even conveyance movement can also be called as a supply. The reason, in some cases, conveyance can be the finished goods. How do I check whether conveyance itself is finished goods? In our example, I am telling you that truck is being transported from Kochi to Coimbatore. Truck is transported from Kochi to Coimbatore by Ajmal. That was the example I am giving you. So, when will that truck becomes? Truck is conveyance in this particular case because it is carrying goods. When will that truck move from conveyance and becomes the finished goods? In one case it can be. Say for example, Ajmal is not somebody who is providing repair service. Instead, Ajmal is a dealer of Eicher Motors. Or Ajmal is a dealer of Bharat Benz. And he has two branches. One is in Kochi, another one is in Coimbatore. So in such cases, truck is not a conveyance for the purpose of GST for Ajmal. It is rather a finished goods. So it is based on where did you account this. If you have accounted this as finished goods, it means that it becomes your conveyance. If you have accounted that as stock, then it means that it is a finished goods for you. So if I have two branches, I'm owning Bharat Benz dealership. I have two branches, one is in Kochi, another one is in Coimbatore. Now from Kochi, I have moved my truck to Coimbatore. For what purpose? Is it for carrying goods? No, because from Coimbatore, I am going to sell the truck to somebody else. which means that I'm making further supply of truck from the other distinct person. So if at all I am transferring truck from one of my distinct person, one of my branches to another branches in another state for further sale of that particular truck, for further sale of that particular conveyance, then it becomes a supply. Because in such cases, the concept of conveyance is not there. It has become goods. Whenever I'm saying it has become the inventory. Are you guys understanding? Having clarity? So they're saying that I will clarify it is not a supply in two cases. When you are using this particular conveyance for carrying goods or passengers or both, or you're using it for repair and maintenance. Whenever you're using it as your finished goods and then supplying, it becomes a supply. Are you clear on this? Can I have you yes? Very important to understand. Okay, now let me give you one more understanding. Okay, this is rather a question. Okay, so if you are getting this answer correct, then it means that you are actually in the same boat with me on going ahead with GST. If you are getting a different set of answer, then I'm ready to sit back and then clarify that, so that I would know that okay, there are a few more here and there I will have to pave the path so that you can actually understand GST logically. Can I go ahead? So the question is, I told you the same example I'm going to retake. I don't want to show the example, but I wanted to retake the example because showing the example might give you the answer directly there. Case is this, Ajmal has two branches. That's our discussion now. Ajmal has two branches. One is in Kochi, another one is in Coimbatore. Now from right now, where is the truck? Truck is there in Kochi, no? From Kochi, the truck has reached Coimbatore. Now from Coimbatore, what happens next? From Coimbatore, this truck will be again sent to, from Coimbatore, they are going to again send this truck. To where it will be sent? It will be sent to the Tirupur factory to do the repair work. Now, when they are sending that particular truck from Coimbatore to Tirupur, inside that truck, they have what? They have tools, they have crane, they have spare goods. Okay. Now you have to tell me what is that the factory will pay this particular person. What is that the factory will pay me? The factory will pay me for the repair. Now it has reached my Coimbatore factory, guys. Now from Coimbatore factory I have to move these goods out. What document will be issued for these goods? For truck, what document will be issued? For, see, I'm sending from here to that. Okay, somewhere in between there could be questions on whose product is this, what product is this, and all that. So to answer that, see, I'm sending my truck and the truck is going to be there in their factory for some days to do the repair. So I have to move this particular goods out. I have to move truck out, tools, cranes, goods. What document will be issued for this? This is my question. So what are the documents I have already introduced you? Tax invoice, delivery challan. What document will be issued? This is what you will have to answer. From where to where? Is it from Kochi to Coimbatore? No. I'm asking from Coimbatore to the party. Okay, so from Coimbatore to, from where to where? From Coimbatore to the factory in Tirupur. What is the document that Coimbatore branch has to issue when they are taking these to the factory there? I told you that from Kochi to Coimbatore, I have clarified now. Kochi to Coimbatore, which is not a supply. Kochi to Coimbatore, the conveyance is not a supply. Tools are not supply. Crane is not supply. The goods are a supply. Then I will have to issue. Okay. Apart from e-waybill. E-waybill I'm just keeping out. I'm asking, apart from e-waybill, what document? Okay, so Christina has got the correct answer. It will be delivery challan. For what and all I'll have to issue delivery challan? I will have to issue delivery challan for everything. For spares, for tools, for crane, for truck, everything delivery challan. Reason, what is the activity Coimbatore branch provides to? What is the activity Coimbatore branch provides to the factory? It is providing of repair service. So on what? You have to logically think, guys. Logically think. Everybody has correct answer. Good. So logically, if you analyze, you will understand that. You will understand that in this particular case, thus the activity that Coimbatore branch provides to the factory is repair, and repair is a service, and repair service will be having a tax invoice. So for all other activities of sending everything will have delivery challan only. So if I have to come to your house and then do a repair on your vehicle, I will bill you repair service. Whatever I have bought in, I don't need to give that document to you, right? I'll have to just carry a delivery challan because I'm bringing that to you. So from Coimbatore, you can see that from Coimbatore, because the question that RTP had even tested that aspect, that leg of the transaction. So from Coimbatore to Tirupur, invoice is only for a repair service. Balance everything is delivery challan because there is only movement. So when delivery challan will be issued, look at these wordings. When there is transfer of goods for reasons other than supply, there is transfer happening, but it is not a supply and there is no GST charged. Instead of tax invoice, I will issue a document called as delivery challan. Okay, so let us move to the next understanding, which is related person. Are you guys clear about this? I hope you guys are clear. Give me 2 minutes. My phone is switched off. I'll have to bring my charger. Check your quiz. I'm checking quiz on mobile phone. Okay, I'll manage with this till the time my phone gets charged. Okay. Because for me, it's like interaction is very important, that I should know you guys are there so that I can talk. Okay, so I'll just continue with it. It's working fine for all of you, right? Can I have few yes? Okay, so your yes is something that you can see there. Okay, wonderful. So let's talk about a related person. See, we are still on the para 2. That too, we have two aspect of it. We said supply between distinct person or related person. So even if the supply happens between related person, that also becomes a supply even without consideration. Supply between related person is a supply even without consideration. For that, we should know who's related person. So you will have to refer to particular areas in the CGST Act to get a full understanding on who is a related person. I'll tell you which are the areas that you will have to refer. One is, you will have to refer to section 15. There's an explanation to section 15 which gives you an idea who is a related person. There is also section 2 definition which talks about family members. If you look at that definition, that also gives you who's family member, and family member is also a relative under section explanation to section 15. Why section 15 has to talk about related person, I'll tell you at section 15. But you will have to remember that, okay, there is some relevance that happens in section 15. Section 15 is valuation under GST. So whenever we do valuation, there is a relevance that related person definition has to be understood there. So that is why the explanation to section 15 talks about who are related person. I am classifying our definition of related person into two categories. And you can see there are star and a round. Okay, on the side. I've written this star and round is to make you understand that the classification. No, I'm giving you general relation, control based relation. This the term general relation and control based relation, I have coined it only for us to remember. Okay, in our law there are 9 type of related persons that is defined under GST. But I told you, there is always a rule that I follow called as slice, dice, and then learn. So anything that is quite bigger, we will have to slice it down to small pieces and then try to learn the small pieces so that we will have wholesome understanding on the entire provision. So it is only for memory purpose I have sliced it. Okay, so general, control and all is not there in the section. Just to clarify, that is wherever I don't have it, there is an identifier that I put in. I put in star and round. That's the meaning of it, just to clarify. Now let's go ahead and then have an understanding on this. Who are generally considered to be related person? There are 5 set of people who are generally considered to be related person. We can just look at it once, have a full reading, then we will come back and think over how this transaction becomes taxable in GST. First one, officer or directors in each other's business. So they are officers or they are directors in each other's business. Second one, legally partners. Third one, employer and employee. Fourth one, family members. Fifth one, sole distributor. These are the 5 type of general relation which will be called as related persons under GST. Now you have control based as well. Now whenever they say control based, they meant it can be direct control or it can be indirect control. So all the words will have to include this word directly or indirectly before controls. Now we will try to make the understanding. Let's do the reading. Controls each other. So it would be, the wordings would be when they directly or indirectly controls each other, or directly and indirectly control each other. Second one, together they control a third party. Okay, so it will be directly or indirectly they control together a third party. So a third party directly or indirectly controls both. That's the third type of control based related person. then third party holds more than or equal to 25% of voting power or shares in both. These are the 9 types of related person. What's the relevance of this particular discussion? The relevance is that in schedule 1, whenever there are 2 people who are called as related person as per our definition, the moment they are related person, whenever there is supply that is happening between them, it becomes a supply even without consideration. This is the relevance of the term related person when it comes to schedule 1. Can I go ahead and explain each one of it? You guys have had a look at it? Okay. Let us first look at the control based relation. That's easier to explain. Then we will go to the first part. So how many control based relations are discussed in GST to call them as related person? There are 4 of them. What's the first one? Controls each other. Again, control is it is not something that has been defined with shareholding. Control can be identified in many ways. Okay, so there is no clear-cut definition on what control means. Like say for example, it is not necessary that they should have the shareholding to term that as they have controls. Okay, so it's a little more arbitrary that you can have different type of controls. Say subsidiary, holding company, etc. will come under the first limb, which says that controls each other. Take an example. Say there is 2 companies, A and B. I'll explain you all the control based relation. So there is A limited and B limited. Say either A limited controls B limited or B limited controls A limited. It could be holding company and subsidiary company. It could be associate firms. Should be fully owned subsidiaries. Anything it could be. So if A limited is controlling B limited, then A and B are called as related persons. So they'll be called as related person. That is the first one. So what is the first set of related person? Controls each other. Second one, A limited is there, B limited is there, C limited is there. So A limited and B limited together is controlling C limited. So of course A limited and C limited are related person because A limited has control over C limited. Similarly, B limited and C limited are also considered to be related person because they have control. Now as per the second understanding, which says that if A and B are coming together and controlling C, then it means that A and B can work together, or which means that A and B are also considered to be related person. So what is the second set of related person? Second set of related person when they together controls a third party. So A limited, B limited together controls C limited, and A and B are also considered to be related person. The third one, a third party controls both of them, which means that C limited is controlling A limited, C limited is also controlling B limited. Then it becomes C and A are related person, C and B are related person, A and B are also related person. What's the last one, which is important? There could be MCQ questions based on that. So what's the last one says? If a third party holds more than or equal to 25% of shareholding or voting power in both of the entities, then those 2 entities are also considered to be related person. Let's look at that understanding. C limited has following shares in A limited and B limited. So C limited is holding 30,000 shares in A limited. C limited is holding 8,000 shares in B limited. Now let's look at what is the total number of shares in A limited and B limited. What is the total number of shares in A limited? It is 1 lakh. What is the total number of shares in B limited? It is 10,000. So which means that C Limited is having how much shareholding in A Limited? It is having 30,000 shares out of 1 lakh shares, which means that they are having 30% shareholding. Now B Limited has 8,000. In B Limited, C Limited has 8,000 shares out of 10,000 shares, which means that 80% is their shareholding. So which means that in both of these entities, C Limited has more than 25%. Thereby, A and B are considered to be related person, because A and B are coming under common shareholding, then that also becomes a related person. Now can we just go back and then look at what are the control based related person? What is the first one? First one is controls each other, which means that A and B are controlling each other. Either A controls B or B controls A, they become related person, holding company, subsidiary. Together they control a third party. Together they are going for a third party. They also becomes a related person. Now a third party controls both of them. They also becomes related person. Or third party is not really controlling. It is rather shareholding now. Now third party is holding more than or equal to 25% of voting power or shares in both. Then it becomes related person. So this is how they have defined control based related person. They said directly or indirectly it can be related person. Stream was offline. I hope it was fine. Now let's look at general relation. Let me bring the chat box again. Okay, now I have the chat box with me back. What do you mean by the last example? Okay, I think it's the. I got it. So let me explain you the last example once again. Okay, so in case of the last branch of related person control base, it says that third party is holding more than or equal to 25% of voting power or shares in both of the entities, then those two entities becomes a related person. So I have given you an example. C Limited is having holding in two companies. One is A Limited, another one is B Limited. How much they are having holding in A Limited? They are having holding of 30,000 shares out of the total 1 lakh shares, which is 30%, more than 25%. In B Limited, they are having 8,000 shares out of 10,000 shares, which is more than 25%. Which means that they're in both of these entities, C Limited is having more than 25% shareholding, which makes A and B related person. Are you guys clear? Can I go ahead? Okay, wonderful. So let's look at what is general relation. So you have to look at in the examination questions when there is a control, when it is happening between subsidiary and holding company, it becomes a supply even without consideration. We'll look at the questions after this. Now let's look at what are the general relations. This is only 4 type of relation I've explained. Now we have 5 more type of relation which will make 2 entities as related persons. What are those? This is very difficult to establish in an audit environment or in an environment where government has to establishment relationship. It is very difficult to do. It's more like a dispute that will arise, because there could be multiple interpretation. But let's look at the plain view of the particular provision is what is required at the examination level. Officer or directors in each of those business. We will try to understand that. Okay. We'll take example of myself and you Senthil. Okay. So myself and Senthil are having 2 separate businesses. I am having a business. I have a business which is supermarkets. Okay. Now in my business, I have appointed Senthil to be my finance director. Okay. So Senthil is a director in my business. Similarly, I am a director in Senthil's business. Senthil is having say for example, he's having a business which is textiles. I'm a director in his business. Now they're saying that since I'm having control in his business, he's having control in my business, we two are considered to be related person. So common directorship or common offices will make 2 businesses related person. Second one, I'm having my own business. Senthil is having his own business. Myself and Senthil, we together started a new partnership firm. So in such cases, then also it becomes a related person. Legally, if they are partners in a partnership deed, those 2 will become related persons. So from my business, I'm having supermarket business. Senthil is having textile business. Now we have a third business which is trading, steel trading, which is in which we 2 are partners. Then our textile business and supermarket business also becomes related person. Are you guys with me? So if at all there is partnership and they are legally partners, they become related person. Then employer and employee are related person. Now we will have full detail understanding on this after I complete the other 2 areas. Okay. Employer and employer related person. Then family members are related person. Now we will have to understand who is family member. Then sole distributor is a related person. So for example, there is Amway. You heard of the company called Amway? I have got Amway sole distribution in Kerala. So Amway and myself are considered to be related person. Now the moment you become a related person, which section gets attracted? Schedule 1 gets attracted, then supply does not require consideration. The moment I receive a supply without consideration, it becomes a supply under GST. The implication is very high. Now the government is trying to tell you that even if there is no consideration, there could be some transaction that's happening. Because you have some influence. How that influence comes? Because of the relation that you have. That's how wherever influence happens, that's where government is trying to establish a relation. That's how they're trying to define this particular section. Now let's look at it. So employer and employee are related persons. Now there is a very important point that we will have to understand. Employer and employee are related person, but still we will have to see their transaction and who will provide supply to whom. Generally, who will provide supply to whom? Employer to employee or employee to employer? Generally, employee to employer. There could be cases where employer can give some goods or services to employee also. Now my first question, employee is providing services to employer and he is receiving salary. Whether that becomes subject to GST. Say I am appointed as a finance director in a company and I am receiving 40 lakhs salary in a year. I am taking 40 lakhs because I wanted to exceed the threshold limit. 20 lakhs is the service limit, right? So I am providing services to say Reliance Industries. I am providing indirect tax services to Reliance. Now the Reliance is giving me consideration. The consideration exceeds the threshold limit. Now the question that I have is whether that becomes a supply or not. Whether it becomes a supply. I want answer. Say I'm a director in a say finance manager. Not let's not put the word director and complicate it. Finance manager. I'm receiving salary more than the threshold limit. So if you look at section 7 subsection 1, all the pillars that is present there, I'm providing service, consideration is there, then I'm providing services, consideration is there, I'm a taxable person because that amount exceeds, it's in the course of furtherance of my profession, whether it becomes a supply is my question. That's where you will have to understand about another section. So I have clearly stated out the cases where it becomes a supply and it is not becoming a supply. Let's try to understand that. So I'm talking about what? Employer and employee are related persons. So from where our discussion starts, I'm saying employer and employee are a related person. That's where the discussion starts. Now, two types of services can be provided, which we will have to look at in a separate understanding. First one, services are generally provided by employee to employer, but there also could be supply by employer to employee. Now, services provided by employee to employer, I will have to go and check whether it is in the course of employment. Let's assume it is in the course of employment. I'll give you full understanding. Okay, a few examples I'll give you, but let's look at the transactions now. Let us establish the transactions so that we will address all the type of transactions that we have. Now, so probably when employee is providing services to employer in the course of his employment, which means he is having an employment contract and he will receive salary, whether that becomes a supply. The answer is it is not a supply. Why it is not a supply? If you really look at it, if you carefully analyze the transaction, I can actually bring the transaction under supply by section 7 subsection 1. But you will have to also understand, we have sliced the section and we have reached at section 7 subsection 2, which what is the name that we have given for 7 subsection 2? We told him, we gave the name, it is exclusion subsection. Why am I calling that as exclusion subsection? I'm calling that as exclusion subsection because section 7 subsection 1 includes certain items which government do not want to collect GST on. So government is specifically excluding certain items. Are you guys understanding? So specifically government is excluding certain items, and one of the items government specifically excluded from definition of supply is salary. Thereby it is not a supply. So it is there as para 1 in schedule 3 negative list, section 7 subsection 2 clause A. Thereby it is not a supply. So you will have to understand, even though it is a supply by 7 subsection 1, it is specifically excluded, thereby salary is not a supply, no GST. That is when employee is providing services to employer. Then second one, supply by employer to employee. If you go and then read para 1 schedule 3, it says that services provided by employee to employer in the course of employment, whatever consideration they receive, it is not a supply. Now employer to employee, what are the supply employer will make to employee? There could be a lot of supply. One very common supply is that there could be a lot of perquisites, non-monetary allowances. I was working in a bank before I started my practice. So our bank used to have a lot of allowances, very fancy allowances, like including allowances on spectacles, allowances on bags, allowances on magazine, newspaper. So I'm actually getting magazine, newspaper, bags and everything from my employer. Now look at it. In GST standpoint, in GST eyes, what is that? What is the transaction? Somebody is giving me goods, supply of goods. Isn't it? Who's giving to whom? Employer to employee. So bag I'm getting from employer. Now supplier is the employer. Now I will have to put it under the scanner of GST, where the GST will be applicable. They said supply as a part of employment contract. Perquisites, non-monetary allowances, but all of these are promised in the employment contract, because the moment I am employee of a particular company, I will be offered CTC, not my net cash salary. They will say that your entire cost to the company is this much. So my employment contract says that, okay, you are eligible for a bag, you are eligible for magazine allowance, you are eligible for some other perquisites. Now, if you really analyze, these are all part of my salary. And GST in para 1 schedule 3 does not say that cash salary is not a supply. They said whatever you receive against your services as an employee as per the employment contract is not a supply. So even if you receive cash salary, non-cash salary, it is all salary only. So it is a perquisite, it is a part of the salary, thereby it is not a supply. Which section is applicable? Same, para 1, schedule 1, section 7 to 8. Sorry, para 1, schedule 3, section 7 to 8. Really sorry, slip. Now, can there be any other supply by employer to employee which is not as per the salary contract? There can be some other supply. Say for example, this is purely example, okay, I'm not giving you a practical case which happened. Say for example, I worked with the bank. Now the bank declared me as the best employee of the year. Never happened, okay. Best employee of the year award goes to Mr. Lijil. Now the bank is giving me an iPhone. I'm getting one goods from the bank. Now analyze and tell me, even though I'm getting goods from the bank, if you analyze, is it part of my employment contract? Will my employment contract says that every year this employee will be called as best employee of the, will there be a contract like that? No, right? So the moment it is outside the employment contract, it gets the understanding of gift, whether that becomes a supply. There is no consideration. When you're getting, I've won the best employee of the year award, and I'm getting an iPhone from my bank, whether I'll have to pay money for that? Of course no, right? I don't need to pay money for that. So my question to you is this, whether that becomes a supply. You tell me whether that becomes a supply. I want this answer to be typed out on the chat box. Whether that becomes a supply. If your answer is yes, why? If your answer is no, why? That why is very important. Okay, now let's look at it. It is a supply, that answer is correct. Reason, even though there is no consideration, it is done by whom? It is done by employer to employee. What is that I have written on the top? Employer and employee are related persons. So since employer and employee are related persons, supply between related person does not require what? Consideration. Otherwise also it becomes a supply. So to tell this point only, I have given the entire transaction. So this is the point of discussion that I have. So even if there is no consideration, since this is employer and employee are related persons, it becomes a supply even without consideration. Which means that if I am winning a gift from my employer outside my employment contract, it becomes a supply. Which section says? Para 2, Schedule 1, Section 7, Subsection 1, Clause C. Are you guys understanding? Clear? Can I have few yes? But there is an exemption that is given because it's going to be a very common transaction. So they have given an exemption. They said gift per employee per financial year up to 50,000 is exempted. So if at all that gift per financial year the value is up to 50,000, then it is exempted. It is not considered to be a supply. Now we will take few examples and then try to understand this. Say, we will take an employer. Say Tata Consultancy Service. Had 2 employees. Financial year 2019-20. This is Mr. Senthil. This is Mr. Vaishak. Okay, so Mr. Senthil and Vaishak are employees of TCS. In 2019-20, Senthil has won Best Employee of the Year. TCS is giving a mobile phone worth 75,000, iPhone 11. Taxable, not taxable? It is taxable. Who is the supplier? TCS becomes the supplier. What happens is TCS would have purchased this from Apple Store. From an Apple reseller, and they have purchased it for 75,000 plus GST. This GST can be taken as ITC by TCS. When can they take it as ITC? Only when they pay tax on the gift to the employee. Let's suppose this particular gift is not 75,000. Case 2. Gift is not an iPhone. This is a OnePlus phone. OnePlus 70. 30,000 was the price. So TCS has purchased a OnePlus phone for 30,000 plus GST, and they have given that as a gift. Now the gift value is less than 50,000, thereby it is exempted. Gift per employee per financial year. You can look at it. What is the exemption says? Gift per employee per financial year up to 50,000 is exempted. So they are giving to one employee, Mr. Senthil, a gift worth 30,000. It is exempted under GST. It is not subject to GST. Thereby, can they take ITC of this GST? The answer is no. Are you guys clear on this? So which means that if at all they take ITC here, then it should be taxable here. That is the understanding they are making. So when they are purchasing the goods, whatever GST they have paid, when they are giving it as a gift to the employee, they will have to pay GST on the same. So if they have not taken ITC, then of course it will not become taxable. Let's see another example. Are you guys clear? Can I have few yes, or you want me to repeat that example? Can I have few yes? Okay. Okay, I can repeat once again. So it's very important to understand this. So two cases I'm talking about. Okay, I'm going to call myself as Tata Consultancy Service. Okay, you're with me on this? I'm Tata Consultancy Service. I'm talking about a transaction that can become a supply without any consideration. When it can be a supply without consideration, I have to give this supply as an employer to one of my employees. So one of my employees, I'm giving a gift. Why am I calling it as gift? Because if it is part of the salary contract I have with him, it is very sure that it is not becoming a supply, because salary is not a supply. Now it is not as per the salary contract, thereby it is a gift. Since I am an employer and he is an employee, it does not require consideration. It can still become a supply. So whatever gift I give to the employee becomes a supply, I have to pay GST. But there is an exemption that is available for 50,000. Let us ignore the exemption for the time being. Let us say that the value is more than 50,000. Now, where did I get the gift from? I went to a shop, I purchased the gift in whose name? Tata Consultancy Service name. When I'm purchasing that particular gift, which is an iPhone, that reseller, that seller who sold me the iPhone would have got GST from me. Isn't it? Am I correct? Yes or no? Am I correct? Okay, so he has billed me with GST. Now the question, I have already paid GST, 75,000 plus GST. I have taken ITC of this GST. If that's the case, when I am giving this particular phone to an employee, I have to pay GST on that. Am I collecting any consideration from the employee? No, but still GST is applicable because it is a supply even without consideration. Clear? Next, say the same product I purchased was not iPhone, it is a phone worth 35,000 or 30,000. There also, when I am purchasing from the shop, I paid GST. But when I am giving it to an employee, since the value is less than 50,000, the employee, when I'm giving it to the employee, I don't need to pay any GST because there's an exemption per, when I'm giving a gift per employee, per financial year, for the entire financial year, one employee, I can take an exemption up to 50,000. So up to 50,000 gift I can give. Now if I'm giving the gift and I'm not paying any GST on giving the gift, am I eligible to take ITC on that? The answer is no. Are you clear on this now? So they're saying that if you want ITC, you have to pay GST when you are giving that particular gift. So on the purchase of the gift, whatever GST you would have paid, you can take ITC of it. Clear? Can I have few yes? Any confusion? We have a group, no WhatsApp group. You will have to put the transaction. I can come up and give you multiple examples to give clarity. And let us have debates. Let's have debates on each of this. That will give you more and more clarity. You will never forget it. Okay, wonderful. I have one more question. In our example, I have two employees, Senthil and Vaishak. To give you an example, let's say both of them won that particular award, Best Employee of the Year 2019-20. Tie is there. Senthil and Vaishak both are best employee, but my budget is only say 80,000. So I decided I'll give 40,000 gift to Senthil and 40,000 gift to Vaishak. In that case, should I pay GST on those supply? The answer is no. Reason? Gift per employee. It is not exceeding 50,000. There is no GST payable. But instead of that, I am giving two gift to Senthil. 40,000, 40,000. Then it becomes more than 50,000 because they're saying per employee per financial year. In a financial year, if you're giving two gift 40,000, 40,000 to the same employee, it exceeded 50,000 limit. It becomes subject to GST. Are you guys clear on this? Okay. Now let me ask you one more question. A logical question. Okay, I'll take a practical question. Okay, so let's take my firm. Okay, this is a CA firm where I'm the partner. I appoint Deepu as my employee. So we create a contract wherein I told Deepu, you're eligible for 50,000 rupees salary. Apart from this is transaction number 1. Transaction number 2, Deepu says, see, he is a very good interior designer. So I appointed him. My contract is for an audit assistant. Okay, let's not call it assistant. Let's call him audit manager. So my employment contract was to become an audit manager, but he's also an interior designer. So he says that, see, I'm going to a new office. We are moving from our existing premise to a bigger premise. So we said, okay, we require an interior designer. And Deepu says that, okay, I'm an interior designer. So Deepu comes and says that I can actually do your interior design. I said, okay, go ahead and then do it. So we agreed for, it's not part of his salary, so he said, I agreed on another 2 lakh rupees. So LDS has paid additional 2 lakh rupees to Deepu. So you have to tell me the GST applicability. First on 50,000, second on 2 lakh. Now the contention is LDS & Co is the employer and Deepu is the employee. So whether both of them are subject to GST, both are not subject to GST, one is subject to GST, other is not subject to GST. Any answer you could make. So we'll take a 5 minutes break. In the meanwhile, you really brainstorm and then come back. It's a very simple question, I know that. Chumma, I'm giving build up. Okay, so we'll take 5 minutes break. I'll take a sip of water and then we will resume back. Then we will discuss this. Then we'll go to the other circulars. We have few clarifications here and there is there. Okay. 5 minutes break. Can I resume, guys? Okay, great. So your answers, all of you have correctly answered it. In case of 50,000, you have, this will come under para 1, schedule 3, section 7(2)(a), which says that salary is not a supply. But in second case, this is a contract payment, which means that it is not a salary. It is not in the course of employment. I hope you are having clarity on this. That's why 50,000 is not subject to GST, but 2 lakh will be subject to GST. Clear? So to get that exclusion from supply, it should be services provided by employee to employer in the capacity of employment contract. So the contract is only for audit, it is not for interior design. So this LDS & Co gets a service from Deepu which is other than audit service, it is not an employee service, then it becomes a supply. So you can, how practically you can check this? You have to check in what section they are deducting TDS. If the TDS is deducted under salary for the payment, then it is not a supply. If it is not deducted TDS under salary, it becomes a supply. There is a very latest circular which clarifies this way. Can I go ahead? Can I go to para 3? So para 3 says that one more activity will be a supply even without consideration. What is the next activity? It says that supply of goods between principal and agent will become a supply even without consideration. This is a supply without consideration. This is the understanding. Okay, so what do you mean by supply of goods between principal and agent? What are the points that you will have to note there? First point you will have to note, it talks only about goods. Earlier, all the provisions were talking about just supply, which means that supply of goods or service or both. Check out the provisions here. In para 2, the activity was supply between related person or distinct person is a supply, but in para 3, they have even clarified it is not every supply. Para 3 covers only supply of goods, because that's very, very important for us to understand this particular entire discussion. So it comes on only that entire discussion comes only for supply of goods. Supply of goods between principal and agent. Now the word they have used is between principal and agent. So whenever the word between principal and agent is used, we will have to understand that it can be supply by principal to agent or by agent to principal. Both of them it can be. So since it is saying between. So they said if the supply of goods happens between principal and agent, that's a supply done without consideration. Now let's look at what are the transactions that will cover here. Now when I say between principal and agent, I said it can be by principal to agent, so agent to principal. When will the principal will make supply to an agent? When should the principal, or why should the principal make supply to the agent? The agent might do a further supply. So first one is principal is making supply to an agent for further supply. So which transaction can be a supply? Is it further supply, or is the transaction of supply by principal to agent? This is principal to agent. Similarly, it can be even a supply by agent to principal. Okay, so first one is by principal to agent, second one is by agent to principal. When will agent be supplying to principal? So you might get some confusion there because of the lack of clarity that we will have from the provision. In GST, fundamental concept point. In GST, return is not a supply. Return is rather cancellation of supply. Okay, I'm putting this particular point because whenever I talk about supply by agent to principal, students generally ask me the question, okay, that means that the agent is returning the goods. No, that is not something that I'm talking about. I'm talking about the supply itself. So return is not a supply. Return is cancellation of a supply. I made a supply for 50,000. The customer returned the product. It means that the supply is nullified, 0. Clear? When, in such cases, when will an agent generally be making supply to the principal? When will an agent make supply back to the principal? They said it is when goods are procured on behalf of principal. There is a rare material to be procured. I can give you scenario in today's end. Okay, say I'm a hospital. I appoint an agent to procure me PPE kits because it's very tough to get now. Rare commodity, PPE kits. Now I appointed you as an agent and you are procuring PPE kit from multiple distributors of PPE. Now after procuring PPE kit, you will give the PPE kit to the principal. Now supply is coming from agent to principal. That is what is mentioned here. So two kind of supply. One is supply by principal to agent for the agent to make further supply, or by agent to principal when the goods are procured by agent on behalf of principal. We'll take one example to understand this. Say VKC is supplying goods. VKC is the principal and VKC has appointed an agent, and VKC is supplying their chappals to the agent. For what purpose? For further supply. Okay. Second one. So in this case, what becomes a supply without consideration? Which leg of this transaction becomes a supply without consideration? It will be VKC to the agent. Similarly, let's look at one more transaction. Say Louis Philippe has appointed an agent for procuring them the best quality cotton material from multiple cotton mills. Now the agent is procuring from multiple cotton mills. Then agent will make the supply of such product to principal. Now which transaction is covered in para 3? It is the supply of goods by agent to principal. Agent to LP, that does not, LP brand, okay, it does not require consideration, it becomes a supply. Are you guys with me on this? Clear guys? Can I have you yes on the chat screen? Because I'm going to discuss a very important circular There is a connected circular in one more area, but that circular I will discuss only a little later. Okay. Now first let us read this circular. After you read this particular circular, then I'll give you clarity on what is the meaning of it and how we can interpret this, because this requires a chart analysis. Circular 57 bar 31 bar 2018. Circular 57. So whenever you're writing circular, it's not necessary that you should write the number. Even if you write the number, write 57. You don't need to write the order number in between. 57 bar 2018 GST. That's more than sufficient if you're writing. But I don't anyway recommend you to remember all this. So the circular clarifies you on agent, who can be an agent in para 3. Reason: for para 3 to be applicable, the agent should be an agent for supply of what? Supply of goods. There is always a clarity question on who can be called as a agent for supply of goods and how an agent would become a service agent alone. Service agent alone. This is how the question would come. Now let's look at the transaction. Clarification of an agent on an agent, is a para 3 agent or not? How do I identify whether he is making supply of goods or not? Para 3 is applicable only for an agent for supply of goods, not for service. Point number 1. Point number 2. An agent is considered to be an agent for supply of goods only when two cases they are listing up. 1. Invoice for further supply is issued by the agent in his name. Very important. In his name means agent's name. Or invoice for goods procured, the second case, which means the supplies by agent to principal. Invoice for the goods procured are issued to agent in his name. So invoice for further supply is issued by agent in his name, or invoice for goods procured are issued to the agent in his name. Clear? These two cases only he will be considered to be agent for supply of goods, then only para 3 will be applicable. It will not be clear that easily. We require transactions to analyze this. Okay. Before that, can you guys just quickly read this circular once at your end? Because I'm not very sure whether you're reading things that is on the screen. So that should be a habit. Slowly we'll pick it up. So I want you to read it once. Keep your eyes concentrated and then read as one sentence. Okay. Can I go ahead? Can I have few yes? Supply by principal to agent. Now let's try to check this particular transaction to get a clarity on this. So This is Britannia. Britannia is the principal. They appointed Mr. X as an agent. For what? For further supply. Who will buy these? Customers, maybe retailers. Customers, they are the customers. Which transaction comes under the ambit of para 3? Which transaction? From whom to whom? Is it from agent to the customer, or is it from principal to the agent? Which transaction comes under the ambit of para 3? It is principal to the agent. So let us see contractually. Now I'm not taking GST at this moment for discussion. I'm just taking the contract for the discussion. There are two transactions that's happening here. One is transfer of goods. Physically the goods are moving from Britannia factory to Mr. X warehouse. Britannia factory, this will go to his warehouse, Mr. X warehouse. There is one more transaction that is happening. The agent is providing to Britannia agency service, for which this agent will be eligible to get a commission. When will para 3 applicable? When will para 3 applicable? It is applicable only when principal to agent is supply of goods. Principal to agent is supply of goods. It does not mean effectively every time that goods are transferred from Britannia to Mr. X will be considered to be supply of goods by Britannia to agent. It is not a clear-cut rule which says that every time there is an agent involved, is an agent for supply of goods. Not necessarily. We will have to put them through a check. What is the check that is there? I will tell you the check. What are the check that I have to put? Check number 1. Invoice to customer. Who is issuing invoice to the customer? There are two cases. Case 1, case 2. Can I go ahead? In case 1, case 1, see there are multiple methods of invoice that is possible in this particular case. Case 1, I'm telling you, Britannia is saying that, see Mr. X, you're providing me agency services, I'll give you a commission based on number of biscuit packets that is being sold to the retailer. So, Mr. X, you identify the customer. Give him the biscuit packets that I have given you. I will send directly invoices to the customer. This is case 1. Who's giving invoices directly to the customer? Britannia decides to invoice directly to customer. What is case number 2? Britannia gives invoice to Mr. X. Here only there is one invoice. Here for the supply of goods, there are two invoicing. One is Britannia gives invoices to Mr. X and Mr. X gives invoice to customer. But the circular clarifies the opposite way. It says that ask the question, whose name the invoice is going to the customer? If invoice is going not in the name of agent, it is going in the name of principal. In Britannia issues invoice, it is going in the name of, when Britannia is agent or principal. Britannia is the principal. Principal is actually issuing invoices directly to the customer. Then Mr. X is not an agent of supply of goods. So he is not an agent for supply of goods. If that's the case, what is not applicable? Para 3 not applicable. Are you guys with me? Case number 2. Mr. X invoices the customer, which means that Mr. X takes the authority on the goods and issues invoice in his name, which means Mr. X is an agent for supply of goods. And para 3 is applicable. When para 3 is applicable, when Britannia is making supply to Mr. X, here Britannia is making supply to Mr. X, what is not required, even if there is no consideration, this transaction becomes a supply. So we can say that if para 3 is applicable, this transaction becomes a supply even without consideration. Are you guys with me? But if the invoice is issued directly by Britannia to the customer, directly goes, then this particular transaction by Britannia to Mr. X is not a supply of goods. Thereby para 3 is not applicable. Thereby it will be considered to be Britannia is billing directly to the customer. That bill will be subject to GST, and agent will bill Britannia agency commission. That alone will be subject to GST. Are you guys understanding? Are you guys clear? The transaction is little elaborate here. We will have to understand the contract first. Can I have few yeses, guys? So that I can be happy and then go ahead and think that, okay, you guys understood this. So if you have not understood, I can take one more transaction, the second part of the transaction, and then explain you that once again. And if it is coming from you, then it's the best. That's the best. Okay. So can I give you one more clarity with one more example? This should be quicker because we are trying to understand things better. Okay. So example 2. Supply by agent to principal. I'm taking the example that I have taken earlier. Same example. Louis Philippe. is a brand. Okay, textiles. They have appointed Mr. Y as an agent. Why did they appoint Y as an agent? Should not have taken Y as the name, right? So Mr. Y is the one who procures raw material. There are so many raw material suppliers. They procure raw material. After procuring the raw material, they will transfer goods to LP, which is the principal. And again, agent will bill. There is another contract of agency, which is agency service contract. How do I check? Stream is offline. Anybody else is having that problem? Okay, it's only Cynthia. Stream is fine, right? Can I go ahead? Okay, wonderful. So let's come back to this particular transaction and then try to do the same analysis. So here also I do have raw material supplier which is supplying to Mr. Y, and then there is a textile company which is the principal to whom the agent supplies the goods, and the agent also provides. So you have, this is one leg of the transaction, this is second leg of the transaction, this is third leg of the transaction. So there are three transactions that's happening around. One is raw material supplier is having giving the goods to agent is giving the goods to principal, agent is also providing agency services. So this consideration against the agency service would be the income for the agent. Rest is the part of the activity that is going around. How do I check whether para 3 is applicable or not? How do I make para 3 check? What is the question I should ask? I should ask the question, who has received the invoice? Here, invoice is not issued, invoice is received. Raw material supplier has two options. Raw material supplier can either give the invoices to principal directly, or raw material supplier can give the invoice to agent. If raw material supplier is giving the invoice directly to the principal, then this particular transaction is not a supply of goods, because Mr. Agent is just an intermediary which is connecting raw material supplier and principal. He is not actually becoming in the capacity of supplier of goods. But instead, raw material supplier gives the invoices to Mr. Y, then Mr. Y becomes the supplier of goods and he is supplying goods to principal. So for para 3 to be applicable, it has to be supply of goods. So how do I check whether it is supply of goods? I will have to check to whom raw material supplier is giving the invoice. If the invoice by the raw material supplier is given to Mr. Y, then Mr. Y is a supplier for supply of goods. Then what is applicable? Para 3 is applicable. This transaction does not require consideration. Still, it can be a supply. Now can I go back to our circular and then have one more reading? Now when you read the circular, you will understand it in complete sense. It should be in complete sense. Can I go ahead? Can I have few yes? So what is that? What is that? Now let's go ahead and then read it once again. What is that the circular says? There is clarification on agent. Clarification on agent. The check whether an agent is an agent for para 3 to be applicable. For an agent to be coming under para 3, it says that the agent should be agent for supply of goods, not for supply of service. An agent is considered to be an agent for supply of goods only when invoice for the further supply is issued by the agent in his name. Britannia has to issue the invoice to the agent. Agent has to issue the invoice to the customer. Second case, invoice for goods procured are issued to the agent in his name. So the raw materials supplier, the mills, has to issue the invoice to Mr. Y. Then Mr. Y will issue the invoice to LP. In that case, para 3 is applicable. If direct invoice happens, then para 3 is not applicable, because those agents are not considered to be agent for supply of goods also. They are only considered to be service agents. Are you guys clear? I hope you guys are clear. There's one more very latest circular in 2019 which took another set of understanding which is there in your textbook. When you're reading the textbook, you will come back to me and say that, sir, you did not discuss about del creditor agent. There is one more area in the textbook which says about del creditor agent. But for me to discuss about del creditor agent, I want to put one more concept inside your brain called as section 15 subsection 2 clause D, whether interest would be added to the value. In that discussion, once that discussion is clear, then del creditor agent or classification, you yourself will clarify me. That should be the correct method, guys. So I'm just holding that for me to finish valuation concept, then I'll come back to that circular, discuss that. I have put that circular in the notes there, not here. I think that's fine. So we will go ahead with para 4. Okay, very important. Para 4 has undergone a change. We will check what is this change and how it has worked. So what is para 4? Importation of service. Then you will ask the question, sir, we've already seen importation of service somewhere. Where did we see importation of service before? Importation of service we have seen in section 7 subsection 1 clause B, wherein if business is missing, consideration is there, importation of service can be a supply. Remember, we had that particular discussion. Interior designer from Australia. But here in schedule 1, what is missing? In schedule 1, what is missing? It is not business objective, it is consideration that is missing. They are saying importation of service can be a supply, even consideration is missing. But what should be there? Business should be there. But there's one more criteria to be satisfied. Let's look at the wordings first, then we'll come back and then discuss them in detail. Try to understand why there is an amendment that has come with Amendment Act. Importation of services by any person without consideration from a related person or establishment outside India in the course of furtherance of business, which means that any importation of services by any person. But the earlier provision had this word called as taxable person. Now they have removed that word taxable and they said it can be any person. We will have to understand the concept behind it. They said, but it is without consideration. Schedule 1, if at all it has to come in Schedule 1, then it has to be without consideration. But when it is without consideration, it should be in the course of furtherance of business. But the very important aspect lies in between. What is it? From a related person or establishment outside India. Importation of services by any person without consideration from a related person or an establishment outside India in the course of furtherance of business is a supply. This is the wordings. Okay, I want you to just quickly go through this screen once again. Please go through so that I can give you full clarity. Gone through? I hope you have gone through. So let me make understanding check on this. How do I ensure an activities? How do I ensure whether it comes under para 4? So para 4 checklist. Checklist number 1. Is it import of service? Yes. Checklist number 2. Is there a consideration? Answer is no. If there is consideration, then I don't have any other checklist required, because 7 subsection 1 clause B will be applicable. We have detailed discussion on that. Then that will be applicable and automatically it becomes a supply. Now here consideration not there. What is the next thing? It should be in the course or furtherance of business. That should be yes, because if consideration is missing, business should be there. Both of them are missing, then it can never be a supply. We have discussed this in the general definition. What is the fourth condition? It should be from a related person. Where is the supplier? It's import of service. Where is the supplier? Supplier is outside India. So that supplier is either a related person or establishment of the same person. That check is yes. Then para 4 is applicable, becomes a supply. Are you guys clear? Are you guys super clear in this? So para 4 requires 4 checklist. Is it import of service? Yes. Consideration not required. In the course of business? Yes. It should be from one more condition. It's not first 3. It's 4th condition, which is very important. From a related person or establishment outside India. That activity becomes a supply. Are you guys with me? Now let us look at, I know there is an amendment that we will have to look at. Before that, let us look at a question. Let's look at an MCQ question. Okay, read the question on the screen and then give me an answer based on the discussion that we had. Ms. Srinidhi Kaushik received Vastu consultancy services for her residence located at Bandra, Mumbai from Mr. Rachel of Sydney, Australia. The amount paid for the said services 5,000 Australian dollar. You remember the checklist for, there are 2 sections that comes under import of service. When it is import of service, there are 2 sections that we will have to check. There is 2 possibility of it becoming a supply. What is possibility number 1? Section 7, subsection 1, clause B. What is the possibility number 2? Possibility number 2 is it can also become supply by 7 subsection 1 clause C, read with para 4 schedule 1. So I'll have to check which comes under what and which comes under what. So for both check, I will have to have full clarity. Can I go ahead? Okay. So what is the first check? Import of service. In 7.1b, what is not required? What is required? Consideration is required. What is not required? Business not required. In para 4, what is not required? Consideration is not required. What should be there? Business should be there. What is additional condition? It should be related person or establishment outside India. This check should be there. Now let's check. Srinidhi Kaushik received Vastu consultancy. So she is in India. From Rachel of Sydney. She is outside India. So it becomes import of service. So that condition is satisfied. Next. Is it for consideration? The answer is yes. It is for consideration. Then this section is applicable. It becomes a supply. Whether or not it is for business, it becomes a supply. It is not for business. It is for her residence. It becomes a supply. So which section is applicable? Section 7, subsection 1, clause B. Are you guys clear? So this is the first case. Now let's look at the next slide. Ms. Srinidhi Kaushik received Vastu consultancy services for her residence located at Bandra, Mumbai from her son, Mr. Varun, residing in Sydney, Australia. Further, Ms. Srinidhi did not pay any consideration for the said service. Okay, we will have to look at that once again. Okay, so is it import of service? Yes. Supplier is Varun, located in Australia. Recipient is located in Mumbai. So it's import of service. Is there a consideration? There is no consideration. Then is it in the course of furtherance of business? Is it for Srinidhi to do business in India? But in India it is for her residence, so it is not having any business objective also. Which means what? Both core pillars, consideration as well as business, is missing. Is it a supply? It is not a supply. Are you guys clear on this? Next case. Ms. Srinidhi Kaushik received Vastu consultancy services for her business premises located at Bandra, Mumbai from her son, Mr. Varun, residing in Sydney. Further, Ms. Srinidhi did not pay any consideration for the said service. Again, is it import of service? Yes. Australia to India. Is it import of service? Yes. Is there a consideration? No consideration. Okay, which means that I'll have to look at, is it a schedule 1 activity? Then, is it in the course of furtherance of business? Yes, it is for her business premise. So it is in India. Srinidhi is actually into business, so it is in the course of furtherance of business in India. Next question. What is the next thing to be additionally confirmed? Is it from a related person or establishment outside India? Is it a related person? Here you will have to look at, is it a related person? Why is it a related person? The question would be answered because Srinidhi is getting services from her son, which means that it is from children, is a family member, thereby it becomes a related person. Then this condition is also satisfied, thereby it becomes a supply. Which section? Section 7, subsection 1, clause C, read with para 4, schedule 1. Are you guys clear? Are you guys clear on this? Can I go ahead? Can I have few yes? Any doubt? Now I have to go back to related person and give you little more understanding on what do you mean by family members in related person. Very simple definition we have for family members. They said family members are also related person. What do you mean by family members? There are two layers of family members that is given under section 2. First point, family members are related person. Spouse and children are always family members. Spouse and children are always family members. There is one more set of people called as family members, which is parents, grandparents, brothers and sisters. Again, parents, grandparents, brothers and sisters, they are called as family members only if they are wholly or mainly dependent on the other person. So if I am making the supply, my spouse and my children are always related person. What about my parent, grandparents and brothers and sisters? They are considered to be related person only if I am wholly or mainly dependent. So in an examination question, we should have that additional words. Brother, sister is a common thing that they check. Brother, sister will be a related person only when they are wholly or mainly dependent on the other person. Are you guys clear? So in the case it was children, thereby we said Varun is a related person, thereby it becomes a supply under para 4 schedule 1. So what is para 4 says once again? What are the check that I have for para 4? What are the check that I have for para 4? It says first, import of service. Consideration is no. Business, yes. It should be from a related person or establishment outside India. Now what is the understanding? What is the understanding that we have? What is the understanding that we have on the amendment? Earlier it said if import of service happens by taxable person only, it becomes a transaction that is subject to GST. Reason, it is because of the reverse charge applicability, which at this moment I am not explaining you. I will explain this pretty soon. Because there are multiple clarity that you will get only when I explain reverse charge. So importation of services by, again, whenever I am discussing all this, you will have to go back to the fundamental that I gave you in the other classes, which said section 7 only talks about levy. It does not talks about collection. I have to again check whether it is taxable supply. After it becomes a supply, I have to again check whether it is a taxable supply. Then only I'll get full clarity whether GST will be collected, because in between there could be exemptions. Now import of services by taxable person without consideration was the earlier wording, and they have removed the word. They said taxable person is not required. Any person, if they do import of services without consideration, but they are into business. So they're talking about a person who's doing business in India and they're taking services from a person outside India. That's when it becomes import of services in the course of business. I'm not a taxable person, but I'm doing business and I'm taking import of services from my related person or establishment. That becomes a supply. Earlier it was only when I become a taxable person. Now I'm saying you need not to be a taxable person. You can be a person who is doing business, not a taxable person, receiving services from outside India and from your own establishment, your own branches outside India, or from a related person. It can still become a supply. Now let's look at what is the impact of that amendment. Import of services by a person other than taxable person in the course of furtherance of business. So you tell me, who is a person who is in the business and not a taxable person? There could be two type of people who are actually not a taxable person, but they are doing business. One is their threshold limit is less than their turnover is less than the threshold limit, thereby they did not obtain registration. Say I am a supermarket, my turnover is 15 lakhs. Am I doing business? Yes. But am I registered? No. Am I a taxable person at this moment? No. Because I'm not registered, not liable to be registered, but I'm doing business. Now I can have this particular provision applicable. If I take services from my related person from outside India without consideration, it becomes a supply. Second, I'm a petrol pump. Am I doing business? Yes. Am I a taxable person? No, because I'm making non-taxable supply. But I receive services from my related person outside India, then that also comes under para 4. So let's take an example and then try to understand this. Same example that I've given you. So here Sriniti is in India running a petrol pump. Is she a taxable person? No, because she is making exempted supply or non-taxable supply. So she receives services from her son Varun, who's in Australia, consultancy services without any consideration whether it becomes a supply. Yes, even though she is not a taxable person, it becomes a supply because import of services by any person is the new wordings. Are you guys understanding and having clarity on what is the meaning of this particular provision? Okay, so now they are saying the requirement of taxable person is removed. Any person receives it will have to obtain registration and GST will be applicable for them under RCM. That's the bigger picture of it, which I'll connect at some point. You will get full clarity on these. Are you guys clear? Can I have you? Yes, because I've already crossed the time. So I will close with this. We are done with schedule 1, which is a very big portion of first chapter, where you can actually now go through that entire textbook, which is a mandatory thing. Please note, it is a mandatory thing. It is not something that you're gradually progressing on your own wish and your own time. We are on a regular classes. So I would recommend, also urge you to go through the textbook and find out the amendments and then read through that. Any confusion you have, please come back to me. Let us have a discussion, and then that is how you should progress on this understanding. Okay, so what are the things that we have discussed today? I'm not making a summary now. I'll make summary in tomorrow's session, 6:15. We will try to start, and then I'll make a summary there. So what are the discussion we had? We have discussed about distinct person circular 1/2017, which talks about conveyance clarification, rigs tools clarification. We also discussed about the related person, who are related person, and then the employer-employee relationship, and then taxability we discussed in detail. Then we discussed about para 3, principal and agent, we discussed in detail. Then we had discussed in detail about the circular clarification there. Then para 4 we have discussed in detail. We are still yet to start our schedule 2 discussion. So we are still in the first set of discussion on GST. We will do that tomorrow's session, and we will try to complete even the entire discussion on section 7, which we should be able to complete by the next next session that we have. So I thank all of you for your patient listening today, and then after I finish section 7, we will do a quiz and then try to check our understanding on the entire portion. Thank you guys.